Modesty, self-esteem, and esteem for others.
Modesty is a value that arises from good and healthy self-respect, which in turn is anchored in a good character and in the virtues that must be nurtured. Modesty is thereby a value that every human being should be aware of under all circumstances and build upon, for modesty is the starting point for true happiness, peace, freedom, and harmony. For in modesty lies the fundamental value that prevents selfishness and self-highlighting and elevating pride from which the human being thinks of himself or herself as something significant and of greater value, and thus distinguishes himself or herself to others, and is of the mistaken opinion that he or she is of greater usefulness and perfection than any other. But healthy self-respect alone forbids such thinking, for it determines that not only one's own, but also the self of every other human being must be respected in an appreciative manner, by not overestimating respect for one's own person and that of one's fellow human beings, but keeping it within the framework of moderation and modesty, so that there is no overestimation. The same applies, however, to undervaluation, to which no right may be conferred. An overestimation of one's own self or that of one's fellow human beings, as well as an overvaluing of respect in one's own or another's wise, inevitably leads to hubris, to inappropriate and elevated pride, to conceit, a thirst for recognition, arrogance and imperiousness, as well as to glorification, bondage, and worship. In the first instance, these unworthinesses are related to one's own person, and in the other form of the unworthiness, they are related to one's fellow human beings, when they are overvalued. Thus, these Ausartungen, to get very badly out of control of the good human nature, rest in the overvaluation of one's own self-esteem in the one form, and in the overvaluation in the esteem of others, which is applied to fellow human beings. If there is no self-esteem and no esteem for others, then modesty has no chance, which means that no foundation for higher qualities can be created. Interpreted self-respect causes all virtues to atrophy or not to develop in the first place, but it produces self-overestimation in every form, as well as self-righteousness, self-aggrandizement, haughtiness, conceit and presumptuousness, as well as boastfulness, arrogance, vanity, craving for recognition and assumptions, etc., while with translated estimations of others, humans are idolized, elevated to heroes, saints, masters, idols, ones to be worshipped, representatives of God and gurus, to whom one falls in bondage, because a strong humility, unfreedom, subservience, defenselessness, dependence, slavery and servitude, as well as a serfdom of strange form, a subordination and lack of independence arise. Therefore, a differentiation must be made between a good and healthy self-esteem and esteem of others and a degenerated self-esteem or esteem of others. But there is also the case of too little self-esteem and esteem of others, which also corresponds to a form of degeneration and causes damage. The case of too little self or other estimation leads to the fact that one's own person or the fellow human being is held to be incapable and worthless or inferior, etc., to disparage oneself or one's fellow human in this form, and to disparage one's abilities, virtues, thoughts and feelings as well as one's character and personality, etc., has nothing to do with modesty, however, which manifests itself in such a wise that inner modesty, as well as modesty shaped by thoughts and feelings and by activities and deeds, exists, and thus in a tempered modesty in which self-conquest, modesty, contentment, restraint, patience, simplicity, self-indulgence, and unpretentiousness, as well as forbearance, economy, and tolerance are also anchored, among many other positive values. Too little modesty brings discord, quarrels, envy, and hatred, because behind them there are still hidden, in certain forms, cravings, desires, wishes, lusts, vices, presumptuousness, immoderateness, licentiousness, and covetousness, as well as cravings, greed, and avarice, etc., which are able to break through again and again powerfully or surreptitiously. Therefore, only the true and the most appropriate modesty should be cultivated, as well as the most appropriate self-esteem and estimation of others. Like too little modesty, too little self-esteem and esteem of others should be avoided, which would lead to the erroneous view that nothing can be achieved at all, and this must be considered in all respects, including the finding of truth in the creation and in its law-based aspects. However, it is also so with regard to character and personality, as well as with regard to worldly concerns and activities, family life, interpersonal relationships, nature, all forms of life, and the universe. Thus, one must never be too lacking in self-esteem or too lacking in modesty or in the esteem of others, but rather everything must always be determined in a tremendous courage of responsibility, through which one's own well-being, that of one's fellow human, and that of all living beings and existences is realized. Therefore, a healthy self-confidence and trust in others, as well as a healthy and effective modesty and an appropriate, sincere and value-offering self-esteem and esteem for others, are of necessity and of value, but never under or exaggerated unworthiness, for it is precisely these that the human being cannot utilize for his or her life and progress.
Soli, Bulag ZH, Wednesday, the 4th of May, 1949. 1410 HRS Eduard, 12 years old.